Let us start. Veni Santo Spiritus, perpetuam corde fides, et tui amoris in Hashem, qui per diversitate linguarum cultarum gentes in unitate fide congregas. Imite Spiritum tuum et creabunt, et renovabis faciem terra. Alleluia. Oremos, Deus que corda fidemus, Santo Espírito, ilustração do Cristo, da nobis in ordem Espírito, reta sapere Deus, sempre consolação e gauder, per Cristo Domino nostro. Amém. Em nome do Pátria, do Filho e do Espírito Santo. Amém. Dear brothers and sisters, today we will make a conference of 40 minutes. Where do I can see a watch? Do you have? Mark there, 40 minutes. Yes, you have. And we will do the same Thursday and Sunday. So 3 conferences. By these 3 40 minutes conferences, we will have possibility to talk about the 3 ages of interior life, like you see here. Something, of course, not complete, but a resume that you can understand a little bit. What does it mean? So today we will talk about the first age. If you can take note, that you have papers and okay. If you want, there's more here. Before to talk about this subject, I would like to explain to you why do we must work, each one of us must work in our spiritual life. Because we have to understand the first principle. The first principle is that we are created by God and for God. So not only the religious, not only the priests, not only the nuns, but every one of us must take for you. It's good to take note. So every one of us have this duty, have this goal. Our life must arrive in God. And you know the principle, the main goal of the liberalism is to make man independent from God. Independent from God. So, for the liberal mentality, man is made to himself. Is made to themselves. So, we just live in this world to do our will and to arrive in our dreams, in our loves, in our desires, just for that. So it's radically, completely different from the meaning in the Catholic faith. That we understand that man is made to God to arrive in God. But we have to do some steps in the spiritual life to arrive in God. If not, we will not, because we will go to a wrong road. If you take a wrong road, you never arrive. So this is important. So by this principle, by this first notion that we have to understand, we must understand the notion, what is sacrality? What does it mean, sacrality? So the sacral world means the world sanctified by the grace. There's a difference between the natural world and the sacred world. Understand? Sacred world. So the natural world for the naturalists is the perfect world. But for us, for Catholic faith, the natural world is a good world because it's created by God, but it's fallen. It's without the grace. The man who is the major, who is the chef of this world, is fallen by the original sin. So we have to take this natural world by the redemption of Christ and put that in the condition of sacred world. And in every little things of our lives, we have to change the condition, the natural condition, in a sacred condition. And this is the first step to sanctify, for our sanctification. Is not the moral acts, but the intention to take all the things to God, to put all the things towards God. Understand? Normally, this is a very important thing that in many teachings, even of traditional priests, we forget. The difference between the sacred life and Protestantism. Because even in Protestantism, you can have moral laws, you can have moral perfection, but you will not have a sacred life. Because in the Catholic vision, the things are sanctified by the presence of God. This is sacred, the presence of God. He comes and sanctifies us because His presence, His grace is with us. In the Protestantism vision, God is so far from us. We don't have a relation with Him. We just have to obey laws and to arrive in a destiny. So we are in a natural life, but with a supernatural hope. Just a supernatural hope. But in the Catholic vision, we start with a supernatural life since the baptism. Understand? The first sacraments are the first step to have a supernatural life. So it's very important to have this very clearly, this difference between sacred lives and natural life. So we can start to talk now about this purification. In other words, purification is the first step of our supernatural life. And why? Because we need to be purified even of things that are not seen, but are of our nature. We need to purify our nature to become in condition to have this relation and this union with God. Because we have in our nature the tendency caused by the original sin that makes us every time put in our hearts in things of nature, in things that make pleasure of our flesh, of our nature, of our desires of the senses. So St. John of the Cross, he teaches us about the purification of senses. So we have 5 senses. And here in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 25, we can read that. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be like to 10 virgins who, taking their lamps, went out to meet the bridegroom and the bride. Now 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. But the 5 foolish, having taken their lamps, took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with the lamps. So here St. Gregory explains to us that these 5 virgins that were foolish were someone that were guided by the senses. And the 5 ones that were wise were guided by the 5 spiritual senses. So we have the natural senses and the spiritual sense. In the same time that we have our vision, we can see. In the spiritual life we have vision, like we said, we were listening today the Saint Elijah talking about that, Saint Anthony in the desert. So we receive from God, we receive from God the possibility to have these spiritual senses. Then we can recognize the goods in a supernatural way. Understand? In another kind of things. Someone that is made by the senses of nature, he only can recognize the goods, a good food, a good drink, something like that, because he is made by this natural sense. And this is very important, especially for the children, because you know Disney is satanic, and they are planned to make children be based in sense. So it's something very well made to work about that. And you have to do the other way, and to show how the children, how the children can understand, since they are young, that we can look for supernatural goods. No, not only natural things, but supernatural goods. So it's the notion about the purification of sense. And another important thing, when we have the purification of sense, we will also be blocked. We can be blocked by our pride. So we can understand now how to fight against this revolt and pride that is so attached in us since we were born. The revolt and pride that are attached in us. So this is an explanation that he gives to us here about the virtues. So you have the first virtue that we work with the memory. There are 3 theological virtues, and the first of them is the face, that we work in our memory, potence of the soul, the memory. And the face not only teaches us to look for supernatural goods, because face, the first thing that face teaches you, that there is something more than the natural world. That's the first thing that you have to learn by faith. And the second thing that faith will teach you is that God is more than you. If you don't understand that, the faith is not working correctly. So the first thing, there is more than natural world. So we have to seek for supernatural goods. If we seek for supernatural goods, we will put the senses of the body below the senses of the soul. The 5 senses of the soul, which are represented by the wise virgins in the gospel. It's very important. And the second thing, the faith teaches us that God is more than us. So this is the first medicine against pride. Because pride makes man attached to his own life. And Christ comes and he says to us, who wants to follow me, renounce yourself. Understand? Renounce yourself. This is against my nature. Lost my life and renounce myself is against my nature. I cannot do that. So why can God ask us something against my nature? Understand how difficult it is? So the spiritual way, it starts with this notion by faith, that the faith, the supernatural and theological virtue of faith, not something that I have faith because I believe in something. Like today, you can ask someone in the roads and they say, yes, I have big faith because I believe in something, in the universe, the region of the something. No, it's not a faith, like supernatural virtue. This virtue that we receive in the sacrament of baptism teaches us what important is to submit our nature to the nature of God, which is much more high and important than us. So Christ is not asking us to lose our life just because we have to die. No. He's asking us to submit our nature to God, to submit our will, our ego. Ego means myself. I have to submit myself to Him and put Him in Him my hope. So, what important it is, I will read to you the growth of infused faith in us. The growth of infused faith in us. It's important for the sanctification of our souls to remember that faith should daily increase in us. Should daily increase in us. It's important to understand that. It may be greater in a poorly educated but holy, just man than in a theologian. St. Thomas Aquinas states, a man's faith may be described as being greater in one way on the part of his intellect, on account of its greater certitude and firmness, and in another way on the part of his will, on account of his greater promptitude, devotion, or confidence. So he is explaining to us that it's two branches that the grace must grow. One way is the certitude and firmness, and in another way is devotion and confidence. It's different. Certitude about the dogmas, about the things about Catholic faith. Certitude. The more you have certitude, you know that your faith is growing. And in another way, you grow in devotion and confidence. It's two kinds of. The account of his greater promptitude. Now, the reason is that faith results from the gift of grace, which is not equal in all. Thus our Lord says of certain of his disciples that they are still men of little faith. That's why our Lord said, you have a little faith. Because they were slow of heart to believe. And he said to the woman of Cana, O woman, great is thy faith. Because she was very ready to believe. But my just man liveth by faith, and increasing so, there are holy individuals who have never made a conceptual analysis of the dogmas of the Trinity, the Incarnation, the Eucharisty, and who had never deduced from these dogmas the theological conclusions known by all theologians. But in these souls, the infused virtue of faith is far more elevated. Look what a beautiful. In these souls, the infused virtue of faith is far more elevated, because these souls are more ready to believe in God. Now I can remember the chapter 9 of St. John. You find that blind that Christ had healed, and Christ came to him and asked him, our Lord asked him, do you believe in the Son of God? Do you remember that gospel? And he said, who is him? Who is him? He just want to say, to know who is him. And he said, it's me that is talking to you. Okay, so I believe. So it's very ready, very immediate. How he was ready to profess his faith. So Santa Gemma Galgani, for example, she said, God, grant that I may one day have as great faith as these souls. So she was asking God to have the same faith of that big sense that she was learning about. So the second point, the excellence and the power of the spirit of faith. The excellence and power of the spirit of faith. All these points are in order to the purification of senses. So the faith, she works by this purpose of purification. And God, in the same time that He increases our faith, He makes our faith grow. He shows us the things by the senses of the soul, and not by the consolations of the senses of our body. For example, someone is attached of charismatic groups, and he loves to have visions and prophecies and things like that. Understand? These charismatical gifts are possible, but they work with the senses of the body, senses of our nature. So, if this person remains attached with the senses, he cannot grow in faith, because everything of his faith, of his devotion, is based in something that comes from the sense. Understand? And when someone started to understand the things of God without the external advices, external notice, and things about visions or smell or something that you listen, things like that, then someone is more prepared to grow in faith. So we can say that these stages of purification are three. The first stage is purification in order to renounce the pleasure of the sin that comes from flesh, from the sense. This is the first. The second stage is the purification in order to renounce the spiritual consolations which come from the senses of nature. Can you understand that? Understand? The senses of our nature can receive notices from God, but it's from the nature. For example, someone that is very devout to a sacred statue of Our Lady, for example. This is not a bad thing, but it's something that comes from the sense. Understand? And when someone is purified by that, he cannot find a beauty in that same statue. And he starts to wonder, why I don't have more the same feeling. I cannot pray in this statue, and I cannot find that same beauty that I found before. Understand? And he thinks that is something happening. I'm losing my faith. I'm losing my devotion. I'm walking. But it's exactly the contrary. Sometimes he's taking a good way, and he experiencing a purification of the senses, and immediately he lose everything about that gave another times devotion by senses to his soul. And someone loses that. So is the second point. And in the third moment, the purifications of senses arrive even in the senses of the soul. That's much more difficult because someone is there and have visions, have notices from heaven, have very many communications about the spiritual world and feelings and thoughts about that, and God takes from the soul. And this third stage is much more difficult. That's why in the gospel we listen that. Let me. And while the bridegroom tarried, our eyes at the end of the Mass, the prologue of the Gospel of St. John. It's interesting, he's making a link between this spirit of faith and the Gospel of St. John that we read in the end of the Mass, the Holy Mass. And why? Because in that Gospel we understand that the incarnation, the mystery of incarnation, is as well the mystery of our possibility to be linked with God, to put our lives together with God, with this marriage, spiritual marriage, between God and the soul. And this is perfection. So it's really something very beautiful that we have to realize day by day, that we are called to be linked, to be close to God, to be there, to be His wife in the sense of spiritual union. And that's why in this Gospel, look what it says. And the foolish said to the wise, give us of your oil, for our lamps are gone out. And the wise answered, saying, lest there be not enough for us and for you, go you rather to them that sell, and buy for yourselves. Now, while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they who were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. And the door was shut. It's very important, this gospel. But at the last time, also the other virgins came and said, Lord, Lord, open to us. Open to us. Please, open. But they answered, said, Amen, I say to you, I know you not. I know you not. It's very... So watch we, therefore, because we not know the day nor the hour. We could say for some interpretations that here
the wise virgins are the souls that were perfect, and they are ready to go to heaven just at the moment of the death. Someone in the moment of death is ready to go to heaven. Imagine what beautiful is this. God calls you and you say, I'm ready. You can call. It's something perfect. But the other ones, he said, I say to you, I know you not. We can understand that some of them are going to hell because they lost their souls. But we can also say that some of them are going to purgatory. And some doctors of the church explains to us that the purgatory is the purification of that soul that they didn't make in this world. And as they didn't, God gives them the possibility to do this purification after death. But it's much more difficult. It's much more difficult. Because someone will start from nothing. You will not start in the purgatory. No, but I have been made something. No. Now you start again. Because your work didn't go well. That's why St. Paul in Corinthians, in first chapter, he talks about purgatory in these terms. Look what interesting. Chapter 3, 15. Look. If any man's work burn, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, but passing by the fire. So this is the explanation about purgatory in this letter of St. Paul. And he teaches us by these terms. So let no man deceive himself. If any man among you seem to be wise in this world, let him become fool, that he may be wise. Very interesting, this language. And why he will become fool? Because this kind of work to do all the efforts, all this concentration of our lives in the supernatural goods seems to the world as something fool. But if you do that, we have the confirmation by the scriptures that we are wise, because we are looking for something that will remain, not something that we will just pass for some days, for some years. So today I think we could understand a little bit what does it mean, the purification of the soul, purification of senses, which is made by faith in the potence, in the structure of our memory, in order to work in a supernatural life and in a supernatural way to become near to this knowledge of God. May God be praised. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost. Benedictio Dei Patris, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descende super vos et manet sempre. Amen.
those that don't see and don't hear and don't feel anything?
It's interesting because I was reading. Have you ever heard about Saint Gregory wrote a book called Moralia in Job? Moralia. Moralia is a commentary.
Theological morals.
Yes, Moralia. He wrote about the book of Job. And he explained that very well in the beginning. It's showing us how Job was proved by God. And that kind of purification was in order to grow that and to glorify that soul. Because here you have a soul that is linked with the will of God. And it's impossible to purify someone who is not before linked with God with the state of grace. Understand? If someone is out of the state of grace, he is not purified. He's just having punishment. Understand? To convert. In order to convert, even in that. But after the conversion and after the penitence, someone can receive the grace and start to receive a purification. And normally it works like that. Someone is in sin, is a sinner. The sinner is punished. And so he suffers. He converts. When he converts, God gives to him many goods. And he thinks, oh, it's pleasure, it's fantastic to be with God. My life has changed. It's wonderful. Because this is the first phase. Understand? When he's stronger in faith, God started to purify him. And then it's maybe the most difficult moment, because someone starts to think, oh, my life was better when I was a sinner. I don't believe why God forsaken me like that. I'm suffering again, things like that. Understand? But it's another kind of suffering because he's purifying. So that's why in this first moment, maybe it's the moment that we more have to pray. Because these prayers will sustain, will give us strength to pass by this first purification, which is the most difficult of them. This is the first chapter of the letter of St. James. He says, Beatus vir cui soffert tentatione, quaniam cum probatus furit, ascipet corona vitae. Do you know that? Happy is the man which suffered temptations, and after that he will receive the crown of life. And it's very important, your question. It's really very important. That's why we have to think about that. And it's good to know about this question, because when we are trying to convert someone or trying to give counsels, advices, we have to first interpret in what kind of moment he is in his spiritual life, to give him the right direction in that moment. Understand? So it's at the same time very easy and at the same time complex. It's things of God are easy, simple, but complex in the many kinds and many ways that God does. So that's good.